masculine versus those capacities we think as being more feminine. In all the traditions that you can go back to, there's always kind of a dichotomy of two forces or two archetypes in the universe, oftentimes related to the creation myths of that culture. And they're often associated to a masculine force of order and a feminine force of energy or expression. So the culture that I like to borrow from the most because of the imagery is the Shiva Shakti dichotomy. So Shiva is typically pictured sitting on like a lotus leaf in the middle of a perfectly still lake, and just in perfect presence, but nothing's going on. It's just stillness. It's just like order, right? And then Shakti, his divine consort, is his partner, and she's always depicted wildly dancing, and she has multiple manifestations, but including chaotic manifestations and destructive manifestations. But through the interplay of the two, you get the creation, and those aspects are in every human being, and how we relate to them is very important in terms of how we relate to them and embrace them in ourselves, whether we be men or women. Both that divine masculine idea of order and logic and unflappability, and that the divine feminine capacity for expression, for compassion, for intuition. Those two together are fundamental to our nature. And oftentimes, the reason I use them and talk about them and think about them is because when we sort of retract away from one or the other of those, divine aspects, we get into trouble. So, for example, if we retract away from the feminine aspect, that intuitive, caring, kind, expressive sort of capacity that we have, we drop into something that society's called the toxic masculine. We're controlling, violent, authoritarian, cruel, right? And similarly, when we retract away from the masculine aspects of logic, unflappability, centered sense of self, ability to go out into the world, right? When we retract against those capacities, we become sort of dysregulated. We become, we have an unarticulated sense of self, chaotic, not able to do for ourselves. In the olden days, meaning not that old, but the beginning of the last century, they would call that, they had a diagnosis for that, was called hysteria. It was diagnosed, 99% in women, but it was this kind of like lost ability to do for oneself, a victim mentality. So these are really important to kind of like understand these capacities that we have as humans, and kind of like, and understand where we are on those timelines, and try and embrace, the more positive aspects of those two, dichotomies that we could have.
I remember hearing about those two, the feminine and masculine energies, as they would say, early on. As I shared with you, I have the religious background when I was growing up and in my early teens and my early 20s. But it was spoken of in a very positive light, right? It highlighted very positive attributes. The darker side, or the toxic side, or the unflattering side, as a lot of people would describe it, that was something that people were aware of, but we would say, hey, be aware of this because you can mean well, but it can lead you down this path. But these are some of the tools that we could equip you with to prevent you from going over, to quote my Star Wars fans out there, the dark side, right?
God, I'm one of those guys.
You're one of those, right? So,
Mm.
the Sith Lords were always there, right? But now, at least from what I view online and when I do research, it seems at the forefront is the more toxic side, the misogynistic, the misandry, right? And then we don't necessarily hear as much, at least on the surface, about the more positive sides. Why do you think people today, at least on the surface, are struggling with the more positive sides of masculinity and femininity?
Mm. That's a great question, one that I haven't been asked before. But my first guess is with regards, well, first guess is the algorithm. Negative information is boosted, and people are also more attracted to negative stories more than positive stories. And then fundamentally in society, that negative aspect of the feminine, taking away the positive of the feminine leads to what we call the toxic masculine. So when you're not intuitive, rather than being intuitive, you're authoritarian. Rather than being flexible, you're controlling. Those negative aspects, we're just not. When people retract away from their feminine, the part of them that's feminine, they become this toxic masculine sort of archetype. Those are the people that are causing the problems in society. So they're the people that fill our prisons. They're the people who are causing crime. They're people who, domestic violence you talked about before, because they can't find that capacity for kindness, generosity, expression in their own hearts. And so when they retract away from that, they cause the problems. We don't talk so much in society and social media about retracting away from the masculine and being incapable. I guess we do in self-help circles. We try and teach responsibility and those things that are typically masculine, rather than the hysterical sort of archetype, the wounded feminine sort of archetype, which is what it's called. So that's what I would guess. We're concentrating on helping people, so that's the noise, and then we're also paying attention to those parts of self that, when they're in their less positive manifestation, it's kind of like, I want to fix that. But we often don't talk about, and it's diluted the words, and that's why I don't like it's to use. I mean, I have to use it because those are the words we have. But when we think about masculinity and then people label it as toxic, always thinking about it as toxic, it's problematic. It becomes problematic because then people start thinking of men as toxic or as women as incapable, which are both untrue fundamentally.
And I think that's where the danger is, because I've always believed that it's a minority of people, like it's a smaller group of people, but they're so loud
Mm-hmm.
about their problems, right? It's like the person on the street corner who's yelling, help me, give me this, give me that, right? Like it starts to drown out the conversations amongst everyone else. What do you then think we can do to help with a better image as men when it comes to femininity, and maybe for the women out there when it comes to masculinity?
Well, first of all, is to kind of understand that these two things are in us. These two kind of templates, they're in us just like they're in all parts of the world, right? So understand these things and try and slow down and look to ourselves and see how we are reacting to situations. I mean, kind of moving it beyond the masculine, feminine stuff, and just like we can, whenever we're feeling like reactive in the world, if we slow down and think about what's my intention here, like where do I want to go, and be a little more mindful about our actions, that, and what am I feeling, what am I kind of thinking, rather than just reacting to an environmental stimulus, for example, that will bring us a long way towards going to our natural state, which is the divine state, right? It's the natural state of a human being, is to be kind, loving, to want to go out and do better in the world for themselves, for the families, for everybody. So I think a lot of people are so spun out in their minds and and disconnected from their hearts that they have trouble accessing these divine aspects of self. Their true self. Their most pure self. I guess you would want to maybe to use kind of loaded language. So I think slowing down is the number one thing people can do, and paying
What do you
attention to themselves. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what then do you think are some of the obstacles that people face when it comes to reaching that divine state and coming back to their true selves?
Uh, the ego, basically, the idea that this self that we've constructed over in your case almost 40 years, in my case 50 years, that we've constructed, tends to define us, and we build up walls which are consists of beliefs about how the world works. For example, like, nothing ever goes right for me. That's a belief. That's not true. If you examine that belief deeply, you can challenge someone with that belief in 30 seconds, and they can name several things that have gone right for them in the last 24 hours, right? But it's a belief that's causing them to look at the world through that lens of nothing ever goes right for me, therefore I'm a victim, I'm not responsible, for example. Or the world is an ugly place. That could be another belief, for example. So if the world's an ugly place, you're going to see everything as an ugly situation, and you're going to react to it as if it's an ugly, toxic situation. So I think that buildup of beliefs that are based usually in childhood traumas that developed as a protective response to those traumas that we've in trying to figure out and make sense of the world, those color our perception and they become our current reality, and we react to the world based on that egoic sort of place. And when we can get beyond that and challenge those beliefs, first identify and then challenge those beliefs, then we can get closer and closer to developing and creating a new set of beliefs that are actually more in alignment both with ourselves and our deepest self and who we want to be in the world, and will bring us more peace and prosperity, which is what I think everybody wants, everybody's looking for.
I had a former friend who experienced what you're describing, and he had such a bad case of limiting beliefs where he always saw himself as the victim. It could have been
Mm-hmm.
anything. As soon as he woke up, Michael, I woke up late. Oh my God, the world did this to me.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Absolutely.
Right? Instead of, well, you stayed up until like 4 o'clock the night before. Like maybe
Mm-hmm.
that contributed to you
I think
staying
so.
up late. Right? I think so, just a little bit,
Yeah.
right? But it became comfortable for him. So what he started to do, and one of the reasons why we're former friends now, is because he started to blame his friends for his issues. You guys are doing, because of your success, Michael, is taking away from my success because you and I can't be successful at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have a healthy relationship with your girlfriend, boyfriend, whoever, it's preventing me from having healthy relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I bring this up is I love having this type of conversation because I like asking from a different perspective. Because for me, I was so close to the situation. And to be honest, it became a little annoying being blamed for someone else's problems.
Mm-hmm.
But since you're detached because you just met me, you don't know him, why do you think people get caught up in limiting beliefs to the point where it becomes comfortable and now they're trying to look and find a new oppressor almost every day?
Well, in the case of your friend, it's obviously protected for him because it's protected for him because if he can blame others, he doesn't have to blame himself. It's comfortable. I'm not a bad person. It's because the world is bad. So it serves that protective function. And it also allows him to continue to be up at 4 in the morning without taking responsibility for himself or doing the daily discipline of whatever it is he needs to move forward in the world. It gives him that out and makes him feel comfortable because I can blame everybody for my woes, right? Therefore, I am still a good person.